Bueno, en tanto, para cerrar, previo al coffee break, donde espero que todos podamos como compartir un café y discutir todas estas ideas, vamos a recibir a nuestro primer keynote de la tarde. Es realmente un placer recibir a Belinda con nosotros. Belinda es una muy querida amiga, colaboradora, ha trabajado mucho en Argentina y en la región con todos nosotros. Belinda Tato, and I will switch to English, sorry. So Belinda Tato and José Luis Vallejos are founding members of Ecosistema Urbano, a Madrid-based group of architects and urban designers operating within the fields of urbanism, architecture, engineering, and sociology. Vallejo and Tato define their approach as urban social design, by which they understand the design of environments, spaces, dynamics, in order to improve the self-organization of citizens, social interaction within communities, and their relationships with the environment. Ecosistema Urbano has used this philosophy to design and implement projects in Norway, Denmark, Spain, Italy, France, China, and soon in Argentina, Chile, Uruguay, and the region. So please, let's welcome Belinda to the stage.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation. It's very nice to be here. It's very nice to be surrounded by so many good professionals and young professionals and future professionals. So I'm very happy to be here, learning and getting inspired to get back to work. As Felipe was saying, we're always dealing with this, gap between ideas and ambitions, and then reality, which is extremely complex, but we're happy to deal with it. Okay, I'm going to be presenting some of our latest and not so latest projects. My firm, as Felipe was introducing, is Ecosistema Urbano, which is urban ecosystem, and we have been dealing and trying to understand the relationships between the artificial and the natural. I very much enjoy working in cities, and I understand this, that we as designers have an amazing and very powerful role in order to make them more efficient in terms of resources, in terms of social interaction, and so on. So for many years, I've been practicing as an architect and urban designer. I was a student in IRIS, both in Madrid and in London. At that time, the profession was very much approached from the physical and originality and the physical infrastructure part, and there was very little mention to the social component. As the previous presenter was saying, this is an interest that I have been developing over the last 18 years, and we've been trying to introduce this social component in terms of as an input in order to make decisions for urban development and city living. I also think that we are living in a moment in which we cannot not only deny this, but it's an amazing opportunity in order to better understand our surrounding, our environment. And again, not looking at the city only from the Google Maps perspective, but also from the Twitter Maps perspective, which give us so much more information about how people relate to each other, how people feel, how people move through the city, and so on. So I'm going to start with three very quick overview of three projects that are more a small scale. The first one was in Madrid, and it was in the year 2007. And the whole project was calling for ideas for a boulevard which is 500 meters and 50 meters wide. And our approach was, let us create a climatic comfort, because the city of Madrid is very dry and very hot over the summer, so it becomes very uncomfortable. And again, having in mind this social perspective, we need to create environments that are appealing and comfortable for people to gather and socialize. So we were creating these structures that somehow emule the behavior of the trees until the real trees were grown. So we were moving this airflow through these cooling towers, and the air gets in contact with the water atomized, and then it gets cooler and heavier. It creates a microclimate at the ground level. So this is the original state of the street. As you can see, it's not very appealing, and the shade casted by the trees is not very appealing either. So it was very much a space for the cars, and the whole neighborhood, which was completely new, was very much car-oriented and very little interest about pedestrians. So our approach was about creating this natural artifacts in the middle of it in order to create this climatic comfort that would enable people to interact and to socialize there. So here in this picture, you can see the water, because this is a winter picture when they were finalizing the construction works, and that's why the water is so visible. But the most kind of moving part, or the most interesting component, is how this space has been conquered and used for many different purposes all over the years. And again, you know, this is kind of where we're trying to design spaces for people to enjoy and to actually reinvent themselves. So this is another project. Again, you know, I was trained as an architect, an urban designer, but every time that we were kind of addressing a competition on architecture, we were always trying to incorporate some kind of public space or some kind of urban approach. So this is an area outside of Madrid. It's a very suburban area. As you can see, all these people are commuters who come to Madrid every day, and this is kind of the public space that they have, nothing. They only have their own individual swimming pools. So this is how the streets look like. And the competition was for designing a kindergarten, and we very much like the idea of creating a kind of a social public space, kind of a hub for people to mingle there, because there's not that many possibilities in this kind of environment. So we were not only working in an industrial site, and not a former industrial site, but a current industrial site. So we were really needed to create a kind of a topography to create this kind of comfort. But also, again, we were, you know, trying to deal with the resources. So the water is a kind of an issue in Spain. So we wanted to guarantee that we were recycling 100% of the wastewaters from the building, not only the rainwater, but the wastewater. So we worked with the macrophyte plants, and we created this kind of lagoon in front of the building. So we wanted to make this kind of sustainable approach something that is visible and understood by the community, because I always like to think that the most sustainable we can do is education. So it's not only important for us to share this knowledge and these ideas within the room, but also to let the people, you know, beyond us and beyond the people who have to take care and get engaged afterwards, because we're only temporarily in places. So this is how the building became kind of popular, kind of interesting. And just because we're recycling all of this water, we can have a green area. Otherwise, it would just be impossible because there's not enough water. So again, this has become a kind of an iconic intervention for the city and for the citizens. And that's kind of what we're kind of, you know, trying to. This is another project in Norway. It was a competition calling for ideas for this square, which is very much a kind of a parking lot divided into two. So we did this kind of test of how to transform a space by one-to-one scale actions. We invited a number of artists, and so we did a series of events and actions outdoors, so to show, like, you know, to physically or to provide the experience to the citizens that a parking lot could be much more than a parking lot. So we had all these interesting ideas and inputs, and all together with that, we did also a number of workshops. So the whole idea was not only to kind of redesign the public space, but also to create the community that would take care of it afterwards, after it was implemented. So we ended up designing it with many of the inputs were very related to the water feature, and the idea of, you know, coming to the city center to do something, because the city center was very much struggling, fighting for some kind of meaningfulness, because of the shopping malls are very popular, very comfortable, both in the summer and the winter. So I'm going to jump kind of at a larger scale. So this is our first kind of project in Latin America. This is in 2014. It was a competition for the city center, the historical downtown of Asunción. So we very much enjoyed, just by going through the brief and through the amount of, you know, enormous amount of information and preliminary work that they had been done over the years. So it was very kind of outstanding that they had a lot of information, they had a lot of technical reports, but somehow there was kind of this gap towards implementation. So we identified all the topics that we had to address, because of course the historical downtown was kind of deprived, and it was not only a kind of a physical deterioration, there was a lot of socio-economical issues, and of course environmental as well. We also like this idea of thinking that we architects should not be inventing the wheel over and over. There's a lot of good practices from all over the world that we can learn, that we can just grab them and, you know, transform them into, you know, on site. So we kind of brainstorm about how these good examples from all over the world could be, you know, translated into Asunción, and we very much develop a kind of a new management system, because it seemed that the current one was not working enough. We also laid out a kind of a possible timeline of actions, because again, sometimes the cities get overwhelmed. There's so many problems, infrastructural, environmental, economic, social, and so on, that it's very difficult to figure out how to start this kind of catalytic transformation so that one thing leads to the next. So we identify a number of institutional strategies, but we also create a kind of a database of possibilities, and we reach the community, and there were so many people with good ideas and with initiatives. We also like to understand that this kind of urban regeneration would take years, would take a number of, so it's a kind of a process, and we actually named not a master plan, but a master process for the transformation of the historical center. And then in this idea of reaching out, of course, we had these meetings with the neighbors, with the developers, with the creative people, but also we tried to reach the youngest ones, because it was very shocking to see that even if they were originally from Asunción, they had never been in the city center, in the historical center. There was some kind of a cultural kind of barrier. So we usually also make workshops or try to create some partnerships with different academia, and in this case there was this workshop with the students, and all of a sudden they got very inspired, and the bike lanes had been an issue for a number of years, and then they realized that they should not wait for the city to implement them, they could do it themselves. So they actually implemented like 6 kilometers in one night. So it became a kind of a real issue the next morning in the media. So of course we provided a number of photo montage and images, but the most important is we created a catalog of possibilities, and we liked to do projects from all sizes and investment, so from S, M, L, XL, so there would not be the excuse that actually the city didn't have the money to make them happen. So there was projects from $3,000, $6,000, $30,000, $300,000, and so on. So there was one project that was implemented that was dealing with these empty walls, and then they organized this art festival a couple of summers ago. And they invited more than 30 artists from all Latin America, and they started to paint these beautiful murals. So the most important part for me is that, again, it's about pride and engagement, and how this kind of small and kind of affordable action becomes something very linked to the identity, and we have all this social media, so they created the Instagram account, and people were kind of visiting the places that they usually don't visit in a different way and with a different kind of framework. This is another project in Cuenca, in Ecuador. So we were invited to provide ideas, because there is a new transportation system that is being implemented, and is kind of removing the private car from the city center. So the historical center is kind of in the heritage list, and it's beautiful architecture, but it's somehow overwhelmed with cars and traffic and congestion. So somehow they wanted to change all these courtyards from the buildings that have been operating as parking lots for the last 50 years into something else. So our role was not only to design them, but actually to identify which ones could be the first ones to make this kind of shift. So again, it's not only about design, it's about a kind of a social process. How can we identify who are the key people? How can we create this conversation so it's not us imposing our scheme? It's like, how can we get all this information so we are actually entitled and empowered to be able to design? So we created a number of workshops with officials, with academia, with different entrepreneurs and all that. So the idea is like, how can we again create this conversation? It was very interesting. We did a workshop with more than 100 students, and they were kind of pushed into the street to interview people. So all of them kind of interviewed 10 people, so we had like kind of 1,000 interviews and inputs, which was very inspiring, not only for us, but also for them, because now we have Google, and somehow we're very much disconnected from reality, from a certain point of view. So we also created these workshops with the kids, and the whole idea was to, let's get the ball rolling, let's get this conversation going on. We also have the digital platform, which gives us a very intuitive reading of how people feel about the different topics all throughout the city. So we ended up doing this short-term intervention spaces that was very much about transforming parking lots into programs, because one of the things that the city is experiencing is that there is a huge real estate pressure that is really kind of expelling the people from Cuenca to the outside of the city center. They can't afford living or doing anything there anymore because it's very much a touristic site. So we identified that, and we tried to create opportunities for people to come back to the city and to use it on a regular basis. So this is an empty school. We were producing a kind of an entrepreneurial related to technology space. And the most kind of significant project within this set of projects is this one. This is an 1850 school that has also been kind of emptied. And it's got an amazing patio courtyard inside, which is 3,000 square meters. So the whole idea was, how can we embed some different programs in here? One of the programs that we were requested and we identified that was something very important and relevant was social housing, because as I was saying, the locals are being expelled. They can't afford to live there anymore. But the whole idea was not only to bring the social housing, but actually to create a kind of hybrid building with different programs: the housing, the university dorms, a library, retail, and so on. So we did all these studies of which components of the building were completely historical and needed to be preserved, but other parts of the building could easily be removed because they didn't have any value. And the whole idea was to create a kind of a public space which was not only for people living there, but also for all the people from Cuenca. How am I doing with time? Because I have one more thing. Okay. So then I'm going to jump. This is another project in Hermosillo, in Mexico, and again, we were called, to do an urban regeneration project for a city and the surrounding, and we like this idea of kind of branding also the project, like how can we engage people? So we were doing this kind of Breathe Hermosillo, Dream Hermosillo, Act Hermosillo, trying to get people to think actively. So this is the area, is Avenida No Reelección, and also in connection with this little mountain, which is a kind of a landmark in the city. So we did a number of activities, but again, the whole idea was to figure out how people felt about it, and it was interesting because this used to be also the historical part, but it somehow has been abandoned, and it's physically abandoned. The houses are kind of empty. So we identified a number of actions, and we did this kind of, list of potential small projects that could actually make a difference in the site. But among them, we identified this building, which is a warehouse where they now is all for donations of clothes. And we thought that because of its location and because of its scale, it could really become a kind of a cultural point. So, and it has also the potential of having a kind of an interesting indoor space, but also a connection to the parking lot that could operate for different programs in the evenings. So our proposal is very much about recycling that building and trying to bring some programs, because again, people are completely detached from this area, especially the younger generations. They don't have any memories of this area anymore. So how can we kind of embed some kind of gastronomy, cultural, entrepreneurial programs within the building to make it really kind of appealing for this regeneration to start happening? So right now it's called Banco de Ropa, which is a clothes bank, and we call it Bank of Ideas, Ideas Bank, because it's a place for action and for entrepreneurial. And then I'm just going to play a video of 2 minutes, if that is okay. Okay, so this is a project we recently won in West Palm Beach in Florida, and it was a very ambitious competition in which we had to deal and provide ideas for the waterfront, for the alleyways, and for an existing building. So this is the waterfront, which is extremely dry and tough edge. So there is a very strange connection and relationship between the city and the water. It becomes very active at particular points during the year, but the rest of the time is extremely uncomfortable because it's very hot in the summer. So we also had to provide ideas for the passageways, which are these service streets, which are very much about deliveries and waste collection and all that, and they don't look that appealing. And then the building, which is from the 70s, and they were asking for some ideas of how to...
that connect us to nature.
Sorry, I'm going to play a video. If I can.
Can we dream about urban atmospheres that connect us to nature? Can we imagine merging aquatic activities in urban life? Can we combine natural elements and technologies to provide climatic comfort year-round? Can we create a flexible building that promotes entrepreneurship, citizen engagement, and digital interaction. Open Shore creates the framework to experience an urban wetland landscape, enjoy the city while swimming, discover a rainbow on a sunny day, connect with others and get inspired. Open Shore proposal for West Palm Beach is based on the identification of opportunities, the definition of actions and strategies, and the achievement of key improvements towards a vision of a lively urban environment. Open Shore addresses West Palm Beach holistically, considering urban, cultural, social, economic, and environmental aspects. In order to connect the urban vision with a coherent design, we have to look into the different places and programs to carefully identify their potential. The new waterfront is an extraordinary opportunity to reconnect the city to the water, making good use of West Palm Beach's spectacular location. The Great Lawn, already a central piece in the city's urban life, will become the urban living room of West Palm Beach. The Meyer Amphitheater will be the ultimate space for great urban events and all kinds of cultural activities. The alleyways will undergo a rapid activation process, ranging from temporary interventions to the development of permanent structures to host new programs. The former Banyan Garage is reimagined as a new focal point for activities, attracting business and talent to create knowledge, cultivate culture, and foster innovation. Open Shore provides a set of tools to reimagine these places and positively shape the urban transformation of the downtown. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Belinda. So please have a seat for 5 minutes on the table. And let me invite only for one question on the sake of time to Ana Valderrama. Ana is a licensed architect, a landscape architect, full professor and associate dean of the school UNR. She's founder, member of Matéricos Periféricos activist group. In 2010, she got a Fulbright scholarship, and in 2013, Award of Excellence by UIUC, as the Award of Merit, and the Lifetime Honor Member of Sigma Lambda Alpha Society, CELA. So the idea is that, I'm sorry, but you have only one good question, and I hope you give one good answer. Thank you, girls.
It's very pressure. Okay, I had a lot of notes for asking things, but coming back to things that we talked about previously, when I research about your work, I could see finally people appears. I mean, we, all of us, could see that people finally appear in the project. So I was thinking about this idea of landscape as urbanism as a way of working in the cities. I mean, if we talk about landscape, we all agree that landscape nowadays, we understand it as a process of negotiation. We can apply that to urban environments, and if we think about that, the work of Ecosistema Urbano is talking about how a city could be designed from an ecological perspective, but not only thinking about how to preserve certain levels of ecology or environmental comfort in the city, but also how ecology and the tools of ecology could be applied to urban design. I mean, when she talks about self-organization, and when she talks about sometimes in some papers about instant urbanism or activism or urbanism as activism is talking about how urbanism is changing the paradigm and is trying to get some tools from ecology. So in that way, I think this is a very interesting presentation that mixes together tools from urbanism and ecology, thinking that the city is not anymore a piece of stone, but it's a living thing that we have to think about our design in this way. So I would like to talk about a little thing that is, we got overwhelmed with the amount of data you handle when you design these interventions in the city. And I was thinking about how that input were thought from you, and how did you decide these inputs, and how do you interpret that inputs to then apply to design? Because we all know that input could determine the final result of the design. So that is the question I have for you.
Do I really have to answer, Felipe? I mean, I don't have to. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, I mean, that is a key question, and it happens to me that when I talk in public, many different places, people will get, like architects, get a bit reluctant. It's like, oh my God, we're losing our role. And I always say no, because we're still architects and we're still making decisions. It's just that we are doing a kind of a preliminary work which makes us much more empowered to make the appropriate decisions, and that's what we try anyway. And what I'm saying that is like also because of, we have this approach which is global, like now each of us can be working in different places, so it's very difficult to grab the local knowledge, to grab the local conditions, to grab the local culture. And somehow you have to kind of find this conversation as something that is positive and is informing you. And that also, that doesn't mean that, you as an outsider, you have a different approach, which is also kind of good and fresh, because you can, you don't have so much information at the same time. But at the same time, this is a kind of a complementary approach. It's like we do have something that you don't. You do have something that we don't. Can we create this conversation and come up with a solution that makes sense? At the same time, we have found, because we have worked in different places, that sometimes people are like, oh, a group, an office from Madrid, what do they know about this or whatever? But we have done such a kind of a strict and rigorous and long research. In many occasions, we open up a local office with people living there for 4, 5, or 6 months, so that actually you gain somehow also the faith or the sympathy from the people. They really know that we're doing kind of our job in trying to understand what are the local conditions, the local context. So what I'm saying by that is like, I think it is necessary. It's something that we cannot neglect, and we have to embrace somehow. And even if we can today find so much information in Google, and there is, somehow I think that is sometimes making us too digital and kind of a little bit disconnected from reality. Mm-hmm. And I think that is a kind of a balance. There is a lot of data that is available, but there is also about the experience. That is also something very powerful about it.
So you think that designers nowadays should be activators instead of drawers? Like thinking about process instead of forms?
I mean, I'm more interested personally in the processes, because, things are, everything is changing so fast that probably it's very difficult to be designing something today here in Buenos Aires for the next 20 years. I mean, who knows? I mean, what I think is very interesting to create the conditions so that these potential changes can actually happen. So, yeah, I like the idea of the process very much. Mm-hmm.
Can we continue talking or not?
I think it has to be in the coffee. Are we? We can continue.
Can we? Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, because I was thinking about when you say we are more activists or we are more facilitators than designers, you are talking also about what we learn from the past conversation. They say, we never build what we design. Mm-hmm. No? And I think the problem is that urbanism has nowadays is not relevant because it's slow, because it's bureaucratic, because it's not at the time of the movement of a city. And the process and the activities and the social processes that are kind of latent there in the cities, and traditional urbanism is not efficient anymore. That's why I think we don't build what we think we need to build, because we are not at the state of art of the cities. Mm-hmm. So I really like the tools you develop. I have some, mainly in the Dream Hammer, where you overlap different layers, analogic and digital tools, where you interact with people, and then you make actions, active actions with people, and then you transform the city in another way, and more fast than urbanism does. Mm-hmm. So my question is, you think that you are activist, political activist, or designer in a way?
Or political designer. Right?
Or political designer.
I mean, I think anyone who works in the city has got some kind of political approach to it, because it's, the way we move, the way we consume, the way we kind of interact with others is very political. And there's two things that you mentioned that I'm interested on. The first one is every time that we come to a city to do a workshop, or have done workshops in many different schools all over the world. And what inspires me the most is that actually we're there like 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, whatever, but it's them who are kind of taking the role, the leadership afterwards. And inspires me very much to see others inspired. So at some point in Germany, we were doing a workshop, and there was one student who actually managed to get the attention from the media, and actually the attention from the planning department in the city. And at the end of the workshop, he said, "You know what? I'm very, I'm super powerful." It's like, yeah, I'm empowered. It's like, and he said, "Actually, I didn't need the workshop to happen for me to do this." It's like, yeah, that's the point. It's like, we're going, and you can keep on doing this. So I think just getting, the locals inspired is very important. And then the other thing is like, about this kind of different rhythms or pace, of course, that's the way it is. So somehow urbanism is very abstract, but at the same time it's affecting and determining our lives so intensely that it would be great to get people on board to think that it's something important. So of course, through these kind of very immediate actions, we can get people inspired and more kind of attentive of what we are doing. So I think our work is amazing. We just need to develop the appropriate communication tools to make it clear to everybody else. I think that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.